Hi, I'm Sonia from Sustain My Craft Habit. I'm going to show you how to make t-shirt yarn using a whole t-shirt. So with as little waste as possible. This t-shirt yarn that I made here was made with only producing this much waste. So very little needs to be thrown away, and I get the most yarn possible that I can out of this t-shirt. There's really nothing else that can be used here. So I'm going to show you how to do that. This was made with a men's size medium t-shirt, plain gray t-shirt. What is great about this is that this t-shirt was very old and pretty well worn. It had holes and rips in it. It was really not anything you would want to go outside wearing. It's really, the next step was either to throw it away or to use it as rags. So this way now I have a ball of yarn that looks great and can be used to knit and crochet in some of my other projects that I'm going to do.
All you really need to get started is a cotton t-shirt with or without the seams on the side, a measuring tape, and a really good pair of sharp scissors. This makes all the difference when it comes to how easy it's going to be to cut your shirt. You could use instead a rotary cutter with a hard-edged ruler. Start by placing your t-shirt nice and flat in front of you with the front side facing up. Then you're going to cut a straight line across the chest from the underarm point to the other underarm point, and then move that aside. Next, you want to remove the sleeves by cutting along the armhole seams. It doesn't matter if you do it on the inner side of the seam or on the sleeve side part of the seam. Just be consistent. And once you've cut, put it aside and do the other sleeve. Your t-shirt should now be in 4 separate pieces. Next, we're going to trim the shirt to be able to move on to the next step, which is going to be to cut the actual strips of the t-shirt yarn. So start by snipping off those seams at the arms on both sides. You want to cut as close to the seam as possible because the rest of the t-shirt is usable for your t-shirt yarn. Next, you want to remove the neckband by cutting along the neck seam. And you're going to throw this part away as it's not usable for the t-shirt yarn, although you may want to use it for a different craft. Most people will just cut off the sleeve and bottom hems of the t-shirt, but there's actually a lot of fabric in here that can be used. So you really don't need to unstitch the hems. All you need to do is insert your scissors into the hem and cut all the way around along the inner side of the stitching. And then unfold the hem and you have a little bit more yarn to use. And don't worry about removing the leftover stitching on the shirt, because once we cut the strips and you stretch the t-shirt out, it will get hidden in the remainder of the yarn and you won't even notice it. We are now ready to start cutting the strips in the fabric. So we're going to start with the largest piece, which is the torso piece, and lay it out flat in front of you with the bottom and top edges at the sides. Now that your shirt is nice and smooth, you're going to take the side that's closest to you, which is actually the side, one side of the t-shirt, the original t-shirt, and fold it over to be about 1.5 inches from the other side, the other folded edge of the t-shirt. With a good pair of fabric scissors, begin to cut 3/4 inch wide strips, going from one side of the fabric to the other. Just make sure you stop cutting about 1 inch from the folded edge that's farthest away from you. This is to make sure that the t-shirt yarn will make a continuous strand when we go to form it. Continue cutting the strips all the way across your piece of fabric until the end. If you have a thicker t-shirt, you may want to cut narrower strips, such as 1/2 inch thick, because there's more fabric there to form the yarn with. To cut the strips in the sleeve section, lay the piece in front of you with the long edge closest to you. You'll want to just snip the hem at the seam a little bit to make sure that you can unfold it and lie it flat. When the edges of your hem are lined up and your piece is nice and smooth, fold the sleeve section over just like you did with the bottom large section, lining up the hem edge of the sleeve. Begin to cut 3/4 inch wide strips and stop about 1/2 inch to 1 inch away from the sleeve inseam, which is the section that's away from you. Continue cutting along the sleeve until you get to the end of the inseam part. And then you want to open up the whole thing and continue cutting the strips in the sleeve cap portion. Now set this sleeve aside and repeat this whole process with the second sleeve. We're now moving on to the final section of the shirt, which is the upper t-shirt portion. You want to lay it flat in front of you, facing upwards, and then fold it in half with the front side out. Again, you want to cut 3/4 inch wide thick strips all the way to about 1 inch away from the armhole edge. You don't want to cut all the way through, or else you won't be able to make a continuous strand of yarn. Only go as far as about 1 inch from the front neck edge of the shirt. It's now time to cut those shredded sections of t-shirt into continuous lengths of yarn. Start by completely opening up that upper torso part of the shirt. We're going to work on the front side and cut the edges in a zigzag pattern, alternating pattern. This is important to make sure that we get that continuous piece versus having little stretches of yarn. Now you want to repeat this process with the back part of the upper torso of the shirt, as well as the remaining shoulder piece that you had from the front side. This maximizes the amount of t-shirt yarn you can get from your shirt. If you've ever had a chance to crochet or knit with t-shirt yarn, you'll appreciate that it's a completely different texture, even in the end product, from other types of yarn. And one of the beauties of using t-shirt in the knit, the stretch fabric, is that it's quite forgiving. So you don't have to be exact in terms of the widths of the sections that you're cutting. You can see when we get to the ends of some of these little bits that the lengths of the yarn are quite narrow. But that's fine, because once we stretch it out in the next segment, then you won't be able to tell once you've completed and made the big ball of yarn. Next, we're going to move on to the sleeve segments. So you want to start by opening up the sleeve and laying flat the section that you didn't cut through, namely the inseam of the shirt sleeve. And you want to lay that part flat. With that bottom seam completely opened up, you want to start at the inseam and cut a diagonal to open up the first strand of yarn. Then you want to continue connecting those cuts that you made before in a diagonal manner across that inseam. And this is what's going to make a continuous piece of yarn rather than circles. When you get to the sleeve cap portion, just open it all up and follow by eye how the strand should go, and then that will tell you where it needs to be cut. Again, just trim off any of the excess fabric on the corners and continue this whole process with the other sleeve. Woohoo! Now we're on to the biggest section of the t-shirt, which is the most gratifying because you're going to get the most yarn here. Following the same process as we did for the sleeve section, start by cutting a diagonal for your first strand and then connect the slices that you cut before diagonally to join your continuous strand of yarn. And you just want to continue this until you get to the top of the yarn. And there you go, one long piece. Next is the most fun part for me, and that is actually taking all these strips of fabric that you've made and forming them into your t-shirt yarn. And it's super simple. Just hold the fabric in both hands and gently stretch it. And you can see as you stretch it that the fabric kind of rolls in on itself to form what looks like yarn. This process is the same for any shirts or sections that have seams in them. You just want to be a little gentler when you tug on those areas to make sure that you don't pull it apart. The nicest thing is to really have one continuous strip, so to connect now these 5 sections that you've made. And there are a number of different ways you can do it, namely you can cut a little segment and join the 2 ends, or you can sew the pieces together. But honestly, we've found this approach of just knotting the 2 ends together to work just fine. And in your piece, when you're using the yarn in the end, you can just hide those knots. And that's pretty much it. To keep your yarn from becoming a huge tangled mess, you may want to start from the outset making a little ball. And you just keep working the yarn until you have your nice big ball of t-shirt yarn. Great job!
That's it. That's all it takes to make your own t-shirt yarn using the whole t-shirt with as little waste as possible. This is the waste I have left over from the t-shirt I cut up, so really not much left there. And now I'm getting the most yarn possible to use on other projects I'm going to make. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions, let us know. And we'd love to see the projects you make, so share them with us. For more project ideas and other DIYs, check out sustainmycrafthabit.com. Thanks for watching.